Hello and welcome back to the Viaka Podcast. If you tuned into our first episode, thank you. Very excited to keep the momentum going and to continue hosting very inspirational founders, investors, and builders from all over the world who have ties to the MENA region.
So today's guest is Rama Chakaki, a Syrian-American tech entrepreneur, impact investor, and philanthropist whose work sits at the intersection of deep tech and social change. Rama is a partner at Transform VC, a Silicon Valley-based venture firm backing tech founders, building for-profit and purpose. She's also the force behind VIP Fund, an edtech nonprofit empowering thousands of youth impacted by conflict, and has helped build the social entrepreneurship ecosystem across the Middle East. So in this conversation, we explore her path as a woman in venture, the opportunities and obstacles in impact tech, and her vision for a more inclusive and intentional startup ecosystem. So let's get into it.
Welcome, Rama. Very excited to have you and to chat with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Reem Ramzi. Thank you for hosting me.
Of course.
Pleasure.
Rama, let's just kick things off by, please share with us your journey, a bit about it, and what, sparked your interest in this field, and how did you basically end up at the intersection of impact investing and technology?
With pleasure. So started out like many folks in tech as an engineer. I studied engineering. I started working in telecom and software development. And in my 20s, I was faced with a health challenge. And it was quite a substantial health challenge. So I found myself in and out of hospitals for about a year. And during that time, it was a pause for reflection. I was a young mother of two children under the age of 3. And I had work responsibilities, family responsibilities. And so what matters most became very much top of mind. The next few years, I had moved back to the Middle East from Washington, D.C. metro area, and being based out of Dubai, where there was a lot of exciting things happening in terms of industry, whether it's technology or finance. I felt like there was a shadow world of communities that were underrepresented, whether marginalized because of disabilities or refugee situations or others. And I just couldn't keep my eyes off of those communities. And I felt increasingly drawn to them. Initially, my weekends were spent within those domains. And then over time, I found that showing up to work in a company that was only doing tech without impact felt really painful and difficult to commit to. So I resigned and I set up Viaka Ventures, which was supposed to be an impact tech incubator. There wasn't a model in the Middle East that dealt with that. You either lived in the nonprofit world or the for-profit world. I think Rawad was an initiative in Jordan that was doing a little bit of that. In Egypt, they had something with Ashoka, Middle East. But it wasn't widespread, and it certainly wasn't inclusive of tech. And so Viaka Ventures, we started investing in companies or initiatives or founders. It was an incubator that were at the intersection of having impact and leveraging tech to do that. And that's how the journey began.
Oh, wow. And so when this whole, idea, started, and what's your assessment of what the landscape looks like today? Do you think there's more interest in this intersection of impact and technology in our part of the world, or there's still massive room, to be covered still?
So I have to say, when I started, I was literally laughed out of rooms, business rooms, when I would say impact at the board level, at the investor level. Everyone would be like, come on, Rama, either set up a charity or do a business. What is this? You're mixing things. You don't know what you're doing. This was a daily occurrence, challenged by the most innovative minds in the Middle East, I would say, for do this or that, don't do both.
Yeah, yeah,
We have come such a long way. There
yeah,
is so much now that's happening in the Middle East, but still we're barely scratching the surface as far as
yes,
opportunity.
yeah,
And I would say even here in the States, in the heart of Silicon Valley, we're seeing this happen today as we look at how tech is getting involved in questionable, sometimes nefarious affairs that are very much against humanity, very much against nature and the interests of nature.
yeah,
And so that says there's opportunity to do better. And the only way you do better is by, at the ground level, coming to an agreement with founders that as they grow, they're going to maintain a double or a triple bottom line, and that they're going to pay as much attention to their social outcomes as they do to their financial returns.
yeah.
And that you also have investors that are behind them in
Yeah.
a very intentional way, saying this is the way it's going to be.
Mission aligned. So definitely, I mean, you can combine purpose and profit at the same time. Actually, you can, in some instances, be more profitable if there's, purpose and everybody's rallied behind that purpose. It really reinforces the mission as well. We will definitely talk about, the whole aspect of impact investing, but I'd like to get us started with just to talk a little bit about being a woman in the field of investing and just debunking some of the misconceptions about women being in this field in general, just like female entrepreneurs or female founders. They might be there could be a misconception around their risk averseness, or maybe they're not as strategic, or they're not in tune to commercial returns. Is this something you also faced as a female investor, or in general in this domain? What are women up against?
Thank you for asking that question. And to say a lot would be an understatement. And I think some of that, some of those factors are driven by ourselves as women and how we view ourselves and our skills, and how we put ourselves out there in the world of finance. And others have to do with the environment around us and how it views us, and it trains us to be viewed that way from childhood onwards. So let's take them groups at a time. I think first, women on the positive side have a great tendency to look at the macro picture and understand it, and be able to both hold space for the impact as well as the financial returns in a much easier way than some of our, the gentlemen.
Yeah.
And I also feel that, this is a spectrum. Obviously, there are men on either side of the spectrum. So some books refer to it as the feminine brain versus the masculine brain, and that there is that spectrum, and some men have more of feminine thinking and some women have more of the masculine thinking. But with the feminine brain, there is that ability to hold space for all. There's also a challenge on the numbers, the math, the finance, and some of that is nurture and some of it is nature. So yes. I find with my partner Raed at Transform VC that it's so natural for him to do numbers on the fly very quickly. We both have masters in engineering degrees, but he's much better at that. Whereas when it comes to looking at a big picture strategy with respect to impact or other, I'm the one that can immediately visualize it and start drawing a picture for people of what the room looks like. There was a social experiment that I really liked that the psychologist said, send women or men into the same room and ask them to find something. And what they found is the man would come in, scan at eye level, come back and only say, okay, I found it or I didn't find it, depending on where the object is. Whereas a woman, whether the object is on the floor, in the corner, on the top, can immediately detect that. It's just a difference in the way our brains work. So that's one side. The other side is, from nurture, we're not necessarily brought into the conversations on finance. And here now I'm talking maybe more in the Middle East settings of you're expected to grow up and nurture the family and care for some things, whereas the male is expected to care for others. We don't have necessarily the street smartness of negotiation, of having to go back and forth with folks. And then the last part is how we communicate. There is a bias in communication, and it's very nuanced and underlying. The Harvard Business Review had an article about this, and it said that, first of all, women who pitch very differently than men in startups, and therefore are received differently. So if the room is predominantly men, they hear them differently than they would hear women. And it says that it even argues to ditch the pitch, because it puts women at a disadvantage, because the way they're heard, whether it's a confidence tone or an urgency tone or even a brevity tone, that we present differently. And the whole industry is biased towards the way men present.
Yes, absolutely. The line of questioning towards a female founder would be focused on the risks, whereas when a male is pitching, it's more focused on the growth potential and what can be achieved. Very interesting. But I mean, having worked in MENA and also in Silicon Valley, do you see significant differences between female investors in the US versus female investors in the MENA region?
I think both founders and investors. First of all, I think we have a much higher representation of women in tech in the Middle East than that in the US. We have more women graduating from STEM. They're a natural at engineering, and they don't have the biases of being an engineer in the field. It's very different than being an investor. I think traditionally it's been more of a male dominant sector. And in many of the spaces, they talk about deals in the majlis or in the, they're kind of segregated conversations. So we come with those disadvantages. However, women who break away from that and are able to get into the investment world are phenomenal. So I would say I've found conversations with female investors to be from the Middle East incredibly diverse, very strong, very attuned to impact because of the regional issues and conflicts, and the fact that it's kind of condensed. It's all within eyesight. Women that I've interacted with in the US could also be subdivided, but a lot of those that are in Silicon Valley have a very much Silicon Valley skewed perspective. Like their male counterparts in Silicon Valley. There was an article that said, addressing Mark Andreessen, when was the last time you've seen a poor person? That also applies to women in Silicon Valley, female investors.
Very interesting.
So when you find female investors interested in impact, they tend to come from communities that have seen and suffered some of the challenges that their funds are dealing with, whether it is color or, environmental challenges or health.
Lived experience definitely helps shape the mission and all of that. So just going back, I mean, you mentioned, you talked about the upbringing, the mindset, networking, of course, which is critical for business development, fundraising, and all of that. How do we get more women, into the investing space and really work on changing this mindset, among women that you can do this, you can, you can become a very successful investor. I mean, how can we address the whole lack of confidence and maybe the perception about lack of experience or expertise or inability to tap into the needed networks? So what is it that we can do to get more women to start investing? Because when we have more women investors, this translates into more funding for female entrepreneurs as well.
100%. So, 100%. So I want to say first, it really helps when both genders are collaborative on this. And we have a great model within Transform because Raed came with this understanding. He says openly, I was raised by a single mother and I've watched her struggle with the financials, and therefore I understand what that is, and I lean in to support women like that. And I have a daughter who's going to take over my wealth, so I'm very keen on making sure she understands that. So having that collaboration is number one key. Number two, you cannot bring half yourself. The confidence level investing requires you to bring all of yourself. A lot of women want to segment their lives into, okay, I show up professionally, I'm good technically, but all of that emotional baggage I carry for the adversity, I keep outside and locked somewhere. And I think you can't do that and bring that confidence and that emotion that's required in investing and in impact investing. So you have to be able to say, okay, it's all right that I've had struggles because I'm divorced, because for me, I lost my dad at a very young age. So I don't have that male figure that oftentimes is the platform that is needed to bring in a strong female investor, because you learn generationally how to do that. So if you address those personal challenges and say, okay, this is a weakness, how do I counter that? I'm surrounded by men in their 70s and 80s who are in the field, who are great mentors. And so I go to them. I don't have my father around. As you know, being single, I bring it up and I talk about the responsibilities I have towards my family and how I can mitigate the two and make sure that it's a strength rather than a weakness. Also inviting female investors to tackle sensitive subjects, oftentimes that are like, we can't talk about that. So for example, one of our fellows last week said, I really have a difficulty presenting this particular company that's addressing new wearable technologies for bras. You can't have that. You have to bring it forward and center. We tackled this with difficulty also with our male counterparts when we were talking about investing in a male contraceptive. At the beginning of that discussion, everyone was really bashful about really tackling the issue head on and bringing up all of the challenges that come up with it. So it was just as much work on the male side as it was on the female side.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what's the this is great advice, but do you think there needs to be maybe a network of support? Is there an existing support system that's there or that needs to be built? What's missing to allow all of that to take place?
At all levels, I think there is plenty of room for improvement. I feel that having you as part of the founding team at Viaka really helps. It's a fantastic thing for women to have women to look up to. There are networks that are popping up. For example, Playbook in the Middle East is phenomenal, led by a Bahraini entrepreneur, and she's done a great job building that network of women. In the States, their counterpart is Chief, a network for women in leadership. So definitely having those, as well as holding space for these difficult conversations of how do I deal with some of the challenges that I have in confidence building, in negotiation, in financials, in really being assertive with my perspective and not being overpowered by a male dominant industry that has the most alpha males in it. So they're the ones that jump in and cut off and argue with each other. And if you're polite, you almost can't have any room to speak within a window of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think those are needed, as well as us showcasing examples of women that have done phenomenal things in our industry that we all rely on. For example, the SAFE agreement was invented by a woman, a female lawyer. I don't know how many people know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so there are a lot of examples of women that have created these key. The term unicorn was invented by a woman. So there's a lot of things that we
actually.
Yeah. So bringing that up and naming these women and showing that in our background, even when it's not necessarily a direct link to like the legacy of the family of drapers, that's easy. My father was an investor. My grandfather was an investor in Silicon Valley. But for us, my grandmother was a female glider pilot. How many female glider pilots in the 50s in the Middle East exist? The fact that we had that strength in the family means we have a lineage of strong women that translate to other areas. So we need to harness that and have those stories be told and retold for the next generation of women to appreciate them.
Yeah, I think this is probably the strongest or the most effective way to do that, is to showcase success stories, celebrate them, so that young and aspiring, investors, female investors or founders, have something to look up to and say, this is possible, so very important to tell these stories and to showcase them regularly. Let's shift gears a bit here and talk a bit about founder support. Ramzi.
Yes, very interesting, Rama. So we've touched a little bit on maybe common challenges. What's some practical advice that you might have for female founders in fundraising when they're facing challenges in fundraising?
I think that first, this emotional part, that you have to look at yourself and ground yourself in the realities of the environment that you're going to find yourself in. So if I come into the room understanding that there's a bias already, that I'm tackling this bias head on and preparing the group with that. The Harvard Business Review article that I mentioned earlier, I think gave not so great advice, which is have a male co-founder and have make sure that whatever other type of things. For me, it's lean into identifying the challenge and then working towards it. So if I feel the pitch is going to be a disadvantage for me, make sure I utilize other tools that they can rely on that are not just a pitch, a product demo, a white paper, a testimonial from a customer that exists. So those are some of the other areas that I think might be useful. Coming in as a female founder, and this is female or male, but very few founders do it, coming in with the mindset that this is a potential partnership. I am getting to know you as a VC as much as you're getting to know me as a founder. So I get to ask you questions. And the more I know about you and your investment preferences, the better informed questions I can give you. And then the last is, research the domains that you're getting into and making sure that you know who your competition is and why you're going to fare better at that, whether if because you're a female or not. But what are the advantages that you have? And again, this is sound advice for both.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, one other thing I just remembered, because we give this lesson a lot, again, both to female and male founders, is practice your pitch and your positioning and your body language and your eye contact, and make sure that women always apologize a lot more than men. There's always an I'm sorry in the word. So one of our training for fellows is stop saying I'm sorry. What are you apologizing for? That we start sounding more like what the investors expect to hear from a confidence perspective.
Okay, very interesting. I think you've operated and invested across very different markets. So Silicon Valley, Middle East. What are some lessons from from Silicon Valley that don't really translate very well in MENA, and maybe vice versa? So maybe you can touch a bit on that.
So for sure, we're looking at two very different markets, and the challenges of the Middle Eastern market, because of how divided your target customer groups are, is huge. And I feel the resilience that Middle Eastern founders bring are so much higher because of this these barriers and challenges that they have ahead of them because of the divided target market, the difficult entrepreneurial environments they operate in, the uncertainty politically. So you're always having to have a near and a long-term plan. So compounding these, the expectations on family life, women in the Middle East have so much more that they have to deal with to succeed. Whereas here, there's a lot of support system that's already there. So I think there's an advantage there that I think once founders come here, it's a much easier lift for them because of all of these. But the flip side to that is there's a specificity required in the United States and a level of granular detail that to be successful in a particular field, you have to know such nuanced information about that field, and you have to really become an expert. Whereas the generalist approach works better in the Middle East. So understanding those transitions is important. And then on top of that, the rapidly evolving legal and financial framework in the United States is something that we're seeing now that we didn't necessarily have before.
Important.
That everybody needs to be looking out for. The shift in tariffs, the shift in visas, the shift in what works and what.
Yeah. No, you've touched on very important points. I mean, definitely, like the MENA region is a massive market.
I think one thing, if I may add, a commonality that often people overlook is the refugee populations that we have are akin to the underrepresented and overlooked populations they have in American cities and rural areas. So connecting dots is also equally important. You just have to take this macro view to be able to see those connections.
You quite rightly noted, it's a very siloed, region. The markets are not necessarily, it's not easy to scale from one market to the other. Not homogeneous at all. So it's extremely challenging. So very interesting take on how, entrepreneurs are far more resilient, really. I mean, because it takes just so much. And even from the smaller markets, I mean, out of Lebanon, Jordan, those tiny markets, they really have to be extremely resilient because early on, the minute they have a viable product, they need to just go elsewhere and scale in a much bigger market. So very, very interesting. And let's go back to the topic of impact, Rama. I mean, impact is, it's no longer a buzzword, right? But and it's really something that the younger generation is after. And it has been proven that you can have purpose and profit at the same time and can be actually quite profitable. But how would you, impact is really defined differently, right? It depends on where you are geographically. In the US, impact is very different from what it is in the MENA region, for businesses, for governments. How do you define impact, Ramo?
Sure. I think first we have to recognize that impact has been for generations a part of who we are in the Middle East. So if you look at our old trading industries, the souks, Suq al-Hamidiyya, or these other places, they had this concept of impact where even if the souk is all the perfumeries and they are all selling the same thing, if one shop had its fill, they would put a chair outside the shop to indicate that go to the next guy. That's social entrepreneurship. That's social impact. They also always have room for the community children to come and learn apprenticeship. And they pay attention to the community members that are less capable of the purchase power by having an allocation in their inventory to give them subsidies or give them those products at a lower level. So the whole concept of social entrepreneurship and impact is really embedded in our DNA and our generations of communities. Now, how does it show up in large industries? is obviously very different. So we're partnered with an organization that is at the cross section of impact and medical community, and it's funded by NIH in the States. One of the leaders of that organization, Nawar Shara, is a Syrian-American. And there we were talking about how the impact in this industry is. It's trying to shift investment from purely investing in the provider side infrastructure to investing in the patient side solutions. It's impactful if you're helping elderly members of the community know how to navigate the healthcare system so they can get healthcare when they need it. It's equally important to make sure that those systems exist for a working low-income mother that can't take time off to go and get her, breast examination. So those are very nuanced impact metrics, but very important because they affect millions of people and prevent them from leading healthy lives. So we work with each founder on at least one impact metric that can move the needle from an economic perspective across the world, and then grow that as they grow their business.
Can you maybe give me an example of what that metric could be? So what's an example of something?
Sure. An example with one of our companies, Clario, that does automation through AI of the supply chain. They look at warehouse solutions. Okay. And in 2022, Amazon reported 38,000 injuries by robots to humans. And the humans that work in warehouses are blue-collar workers. So if they miss a day of work, then that affects their livelihood significantly. And so what Clario does is the AI quality assurance software that prevents injuries. So for us, the injury prevention metric is what we're looking at for this particular AI company. And if you can lower injuries across warehouses across the United States, that's huge. And you're affecting a vulnerable population.
Yeah. Very interesting. Definitely, it's important to have clarity and like a complete picture of, the entire, the entire like ecosystem, and just make sure that all the dots are connected so that it's just an how do you say it? Holistic, yes, a very holistic approach to that, to be able to achieve genuine impact. Amazing. When it comes to impact investing, I feel sometimes investors they put a lot of pressure on the founders to report on KPIs, and it really takes a lot of resources from the founders. How can we address this? Invest in founders who are achieving impact, but also not to overburden them with data collection and reporting in a way to satisfy the investors, and then the investors, LPs basically, who are looking for those metrics as well.
So within Transform, we found a way to have this amazing fellowship with talented mid-career professionals from across different segments. So these professionals come in and they already have insights on their industry. Shadi is a great example. He's a medical doctor with 15 years experience who loves impact, loves investing in deep tech. When we acquire an interest in a med tech or health tech company, we work internally on what are the possibilities of impact metrics that this company can have. And then our fellows proactively go out, get data, they work with the founder. They're an extension of their unit to create value on the impact side without burdening said founder. So they do spend a little bit of time, but not a disproportionately high level of time because of the support that they're getting from us. And with AI developing, it's so much easier to put the tools and the data analytics to measure than it used to be.
Yeah, definitely. No, this is a very smart way of doing that, for sure. And maybe also aligning the KPIs in a way that's strategic also for the founders. So when they're collecting this data, it's really informing their business and their strategy as well.
100%. Yeah, I agree with you.
Rama, what excites you the most about the future of women in tech and venture?
What excites me the most about it?
Yes.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
It's a greenfield opportunity. Right now, we're investing in only 3% of women are getting venture capital investments. And so half of your population is women. That means you have a huge potential to tap into great ideas and really powerful solutions that can have very high return. So that's one, the opportunity. Two, shifting the landscape. A gentleman, an investor I was speaking with yesterday said, us men, we've been leading the world, and quite frankly, we've made a mess of it. We represent the dominant players in politics and in other industry, and now we want you women to take it over and help us figure out and bring it back to balance. At the end of the day, nature has both, and you need both energies to make something work. So there's a huge opportunity to have a positive impact. And really, the way we look at it is there are two lenses. If you don't see very well with one eye closed, so you need both eyes to see good perspective. And that's what women bring in.
For sure. We're just about to wrap up here. Maybe I have one more question. Who are some founders or investors that have inspired you or you look up to? Maybe some names.
It's interesting. Founders are abundant, and it would be really difficult to name one and not name the others. Our portfolio has some great founders: Omar Tawakkul, Amr Awadallah. Both gentlemen have done phenomenally well. Dina Katabi is an amazing MIT professor and a founder of a health tech company. Maya Saeed, another MIT graduate who's a great founder.
What are they doing? What are their businesses? What are they doing? What field?
So Dina Katabi's invented a touchless solution to detect changes in health conditions. So it's something that looks like a router that sits in your home, and yet it's detecting changes in your health and vitality. And then Maya Saeed has a platform that helps you go through the very complicated healthcare system and simplifies it both from a provider and a consumer side. Both very important, I think, and very impactful solutions. So that's on the founder side. On the investor side, it continuously grows. One of the investors, the institutional investors who invested in us, Include VC, is led by Bahia, who's a great thinker, a collaborator. She's running the fund of funds. She's a Black woman with a huge personality that's extremely positive and knows how to rally community around. So she's a great example of that. But I do want to emphasize one point, and it just happened yesterday. I was boarding a flight, and John Mersheimer, who's an author, a published author and a professor at Chicago University, he's written about APAC and other very relevant topics. And I mean, I almost hugged him. I felt like a teenager who was seeing her idol, because for me, in order for us to get investment right, we really have to see macroeconomics, macro political environment, and authors like him, as well as authors like Change Agent, James Lowry. You have to see those perspectives to know, like you were saying earlier, Reem, where the leverage points are to have this systematic change. And folks are outside of our industry, and we bring them through our events like the Impact Summit that's coming up for Transform in October. We feature those sort of speakers to give founders and investors that global perspective that is so necessary, that without, you won't know that your iPhone is ruining the Congo. And you have to be able to address the Congo issue in order to have a sustainable iPhone business.
Yeah. No, Rama, this was really incredible, extremely insightful. Before we wrap up, you mentioned your event in October. Is there anything that you and Rad are working on that you'd like our audience to be aware of? How can they follow this work?
Thank you for that. Of course, there's a lot on our website, so I would invite everyone to go to Transform VC and sign up for our mailing list. We'll let you know of the upcoming events. Impact a Billion has been our corner kind of impact thesis, and we have the summit that's coming up in October 24th on a Friday. We will be convening our community around these conversations of deep tech and impact, and we would love to invite everyone, as well as the webinar series that features our founders. So we have one coming up in May with Isono, one of the companies that we've invested in on the healthcare side. So webinar series, Impact a Billion Summit, and more on Transform VC. And Impact a Billion is under impactabillion.com and, of course, transform.vc. It's my pleasure, too. Thank you for hosting me. This is really great.